The sun beat down onto the sand, creating waves of heat that distorted the world around them. Max had been walking for what felt like hours, but in reality was only 30 minutes into his hike across the desert. It wasn't supposed to be this hard. The journey from his car to the abandoned settlement shouldn't have taken more than 15 minutes. But the oppressive heat was playing tricks on him, making the walk seem much longer than it actually was. He knew he was close to the settlement because he could see it on the horizon. He just needed to get over the last rise in the sand dunes, and then he would be there. But with each step, his body screamed out for water. His throat was dry and scratchy, and he could feel the beginnings of a terrible sunburn on his shoulders and the back of his neck. Then he saw it, a shimmering mirage on the horizon. Was it a lake or an ocean? As he crested the dune, he saw it was neither. It was a small pool of stagnant water, surrounded by a ring of rocks. Max didn't hesitate. He scrambled down the rocky ring and waded into the water, ignoring the dead fish that floated on the surface. He cupped his hands around the dirty water and drank deeply. It was like 1,000 tiny needles pricking at his tongue and throat, but he drank it all anyway. When he pulled away, he saw a dark shape in the water, a human skull. Max recoiled in disgust and stepped back from the pool. But then he noticed something odd about the skull. It seemed to be grinning at him, its teeth bared in a silent snarl. Max blinked, shook his head, and looked away. He must be hallucinating. The heat was definitely getting to him. He needed to get to that settlement before he started seeing things that weren't really there. The abandoned settlement should only have taken 15 minutes to reach, but it took Max almost an hour to find. When he finally found the road leading to it, he broke into a run, desperate for water and terrified of what else he might see. The buildings were all crumbling ruins when he reached the settlement, nothing but dusty shells of their former selves. But as he rounded a corner, he saw a building still standing, a single two-story house with peeling paint and boarded windows. Max hesitated for a moment, wondering if he should go inside. He had a sudden vision of someone standing in the window, staring at him, but it was gone in an instant. He continued on and walked past the house without a second thought. He needed to find water first. Maybe there was a well or a spring somewhere near the settlement. Then he would go back and check out the house. There had to be water there, right? He searched for water for what felt like hours, but it was probably only 20 minutes. He couldn't find any sign of water anywhere, so he sat down on a rock to catch his breath. That's when he saw it again, the vision of the man in the window. It wasn't a vision. The man was really there. Max watched as the man opened the window and climbed onto the windowsill. He was young, no older than Max, with long flowing hair and a scraggly beard. He stared at Max, his eyes wide and blank. Max stared back for a moment, then turned and ran back towards the road. The man jumped from the windowsill and landed silently on the ground. Max could hear the scrape of his shoes on the pavement behind him. He picked up his pace, glancing over his shoulder to see if the man was following him. He was. Max broke into a run, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The man was gaining on him, and Max could hear his heavy footsteps pounding on the pavement. He dared another glance over his shoulder and froze. The man wasn't getting closer. He was staying the same distance away, almost like he was floating above the ground. Max slowed to a walk, confused. Why wasn't the man coming after him anymore? Had he imagined it all? The water, the skull, the man in the window? He looked back at the settlement. It was completely deserted. There was no one there. So why did he feel like he was being watched? He decided to go back to the house. Maybe there was water there. Maybe he could find something to help him understand what was going on. When he got closer, he realized that the front door was open. He hesitated for a moment, then walked inside. The floorboards creaked under his weight, and the air inside was stale and dusty. Then he heard a voice. "You're finally back," it said. Max whirled around to find the source, but there was no one there. "I was wondering when you'd come back," the voice said. "I've been waiting for you." Max spun around again, this time to the window. The boards had been removed and the man from earlier was standing outside, his eyes boring into Max. "Come outside," the man said. His voice was raspy and dry, like the desert wind. "We need to talk." Max hesitated. He could feel his heart pounding in his chest, but he couldn't bring himself to look away from the man. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "You know what I want," the man replied. "You know what we both want." He took a step back and gestured to the sky. "Don't you see? We're both thirsty." Max looked up at the sky. The sun was high overhead, and the clouds had vanished. It was going to be a long, hot day. And then he saw it, a glint of sunlight on the horizon. At first it was just a speck, but it grew larger and larger until he could make out the shape of a person running towards him. A woman. The woman was running towards him, her arms outstretched. "Water," she cried. "I have water." She stumbled to a stop in front of Max and collapsed. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and pleading. "Please," she whispered. "Please give me water." She was kneeling in front of him now, her head down. Max could see the dust on her skin and the sweat on her forehead. Her hair was matted with dirt, and her clothes were torn and filthy. "Please," she begged. "I need water." Max reached out and touched her shoulder. She flinched and looked up at him, her eyes wild with fear. He stepped back, startled by her reaction. He didn't mean to scare her. He just wanted to help. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to startle you." "You don't understand," she whispered. "I need water." Max nodded. He understood. They both needed water. And then he knew what he had to do. He turned and walked back to the settlement. The woman watched him go, her eyes never leaving his. He went to the skull and dipped his hands into the water. The skull grinned at him, its teeth bared in a silent snarl. Max filled his hands with water and ran back to the woman. He knelt in front of her and cupped the water in her hands. She closed her eyes and drank deeply. When she opened them again, they were filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "You saved me." She looked down at the water in her hands. "But I need more," she said. "We both do." She stood up and took Max's hand. Together, they walked back to the skull. The sun beat down on them, and Max could feel the heat radiating off the sand. They stayed there for what felt like hours, drinking the water and watching the sun climb higher in the sky. At one point, Max looked away and saw the man from the window standing behind them. He was watching them, his eyes fixed on the woman. Max turned back to the woman, and she looked at him, her eyes filled with understanding. "You know," she said, "we don't need water." Max shook his head. "We do," he said. "We have to." The woman smiled sadly. "No," she whispered. "We don't." She looked back at the man. "Do you want water, John?" she asked. "Do you want to come back?" The man took a step forward, then another. "Yes," he said. His voice was hoarse with thirst. "Yes, I want water." As John drank, a smile slowly spread across his face. "I haven't had water in so long," he whispered. "I thought I'd never have water again." He looked up at the sky. "I can't remember how long I've been here," he said. "I can't remember anything." The woman reached out and touched his arm. "It doesn't matter," she whispered. "All that matters is that you're here now." John looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for bringing me back." The woman smiled. "I didn't bring you back," she said. "You brought yourself back. I just helped you see that you were here all along." John frowned. "I don't understand." The woman leaned closer and whispered, "This isn't real, John. None of this is real." John looked around in confusion. "What do you mean?" he asked. "This is your mind, John," the woman said. "You created this world when you stopped believing in magic." John's eyes widened in realization. "I didn't know," he whispered. "I thought I was losing my mind." "You're not losing your mind, John," the woman said gently. "You're finding it. You're remembering who you are." She stood up and held out her hand to him. "Come on," she said. "It's time to go home." John hesitated for a moment, then took her hand and stood up. As they walked away from the desert, John turned back to look at the house. It was gone. In its place was a shimmering pool of water, surrounded by a ring of rocks. And on the surface of the water floated a human skull, grinning silently at the sun. It was one of those mazes that you read about in stories where if you went through it, you would be forever lost. It's not something that you want to do, but if you are desperate enough, then you just have to do what you have to do. I remember when I decided to go into that maze. I had no idea what was waiting for me at the end of it. If only I had known, I wouldn't have gone in there. But back then I thought I could handle whatever came my way. I thought I was brave, but little did I know I was in for the scare of my life. I had been hiking all day with my two friends, James and Katie. We had walked deep into the forest without finding a single soul. Then we saw it in the distance, a path that looked like it hadn't been walked on in years. And on the other side of the path was an entrance to a dark and scary-looking maze made out of old, gnarled trees that seemed to twist and turn without any rhyme or reason. "Do you think anyone's ever gotten lost in here?" asked Katie, her voice shaking slightly. She looked terrified, but also intrigued by the maze. James let out a nervous laugh. "Don't be silly, Katie. There's no such thing as getting lost in a maze." But even as he said those words, I could tell he didn't believe them. None of us did. The three of us stood there awkwardly for a moment, each of us wondering what the other two were thinking. Finally, James broke the silence. "Well, who wants to test their luck?" he asked, trying to sound brave, but failing miserably. Katie shook her head so hard that her long, flowing hair whipped around her face. "No, thank you," she said. "I don't want to get lost in there." That left just me. I knew that if I refused, James would go in without me and Katie would probably follow after him. So I might as well go with them. "Well, here goes nothing," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. As I stepped into the maze, the trees seemed to close in around me, forming a tunnel overhead. The air grew colder and the shadows deeper. I could hear the sound of my own breathing, but I couldn't see James or Katie anymore. I called out to them, but my voice echoed back at me and sounded strange and distorted. I tried to turn back, but it was too late. The trees had shifted and now blocked my way out. I started to panic. What had I gotten myself into? Was this maze some kind of trap? I ran deeper into the maze, but it seemed to go on forever. The trees were all the same, and they all looked like they were reaching out to grab me. I could feel their rough, gnarled branches scratching at my skin, and I could smell their musty, decaying wood. I wanted to scream, but I knew that would only make things worse. So I kept quiet and tried to find a way out. But the more I walked, the more I realized that I was getting lost. I could hear the distant sound of voices calling my name, but when I turned around, I couldn't see anyone. I was completely alone. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It sent shivers down my spine, and I couldn't help but let out a small whimper. The growl grew louder, and I could feel the ground beneath my feet vibrating. I turned and ran, stumbling over tree roots and fallen branches, desperate to get away from whatever was pursuing me. But I couldn't run forever, and soon I felt the hot, fetid breath of the creature on my neck. I risked a glance over my shoulder and saw the most horrifying sight. It was a twisted, grotesque parody of a human, all sharp teeth and claws. Its eyes glowed red in the gloom, and its skin was stretched taut over its bones like a shroud. I screamed and stumbled on, but the creature was faster than me, and soon it was upon me. I shut my eyes tight, bracing for the worst, but it never came. I opened my eyes to see that the creature was gone. I was safe, at least for now, but I knew it would be back, and when it returned, I wouldn't be so lucky. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs ached. But then I saw a light in the distance, and hope surged through me. Maybe I had a chance to escape after all. I stumbled towards it, my heart pounding in my chest, and soon I was out of the maze and in a clearing. But my joy was short-lived. As I turned to go, I saw the creature standing in the opening of the maze, its eyes fixed on me. I tried to call out for help, but no sound came out of my throat. I was paralyzed with fear. The creature took a step forward and then another. It was coming for me. I ran, but it was too late. The creature was upon me, and I could feel its hot, fetid breath on my neck. I closed my eyes and waited for the pain, but it never came. Instead, I felt something cold and wet lick my face. I opened my eyes to see the creature close up, its eyes boring into mine. It opened its mouth and made a low growling sound. It wasn't threatening me. It was trying to communicate with me. And then it did something that made my blood run cold. It reached out and touched my hand. Its fingers were long and bony and felt like ice, but they were human fingers. They weren't claws. The creature took a step back and motioned with its head for me to follow it. I hesitated, but I knew I had no choice. I had to trust this creature if I wanted to get out of the maze alive. So I followed it deeper into the forest, my heart pounding in my chest. The trees grew thicker and the shadows deeper. And then suddenly the ground beneath my feet gave way, and I tumbled down a rabbit hole. I landed in a heap at the bottom, my ankle twisted at an unnatural angle. I cried out in pain, but no one answered. I was completely alone. I tried to stand up, but I couldn't put weight on my ankle. I was trapped. Then I heard the sound of footsteps above me, and I cried out, hoping someone would hear me. But when the footsteps stopped, I knew no one was coming. I was alone. And then I heard the sound of laughter. It was the creature from the maze, and it wasn't laughing at me. It was laughing with me. I felt something wet trickle down my face and realized it was a tear. I was crying. I was scared, but I was also laughing. And then everything went black. When I woke up, I was lying on the ground in the middle of the maze. My ankle was still hurt, but I could walk. And when I looked around, I saw that James and Katie were kneeling beside me. "You're awake," James said, his voice shaking. "I was so worried you weren't going to make it." "What happened?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "You collapsed," Katie said. "We found you like this in the maze." I looked at them, confused. "But how did you find me? I thought I was trapped in there forever." "You were," James said. "But the maze doesn't keep people forever. It only keeps those who are meant to stay." "Meant to stay?" I whispered. "What do you mean?" But they didn't answer. And as we walked away from the maze together, I knew they weren't going to tell me. I was grateful for that because I didn't want to know what the maze had planned for me if I'd stayed any longer. Now, whenever I think about that maze, I can't help but feel a sense of dread. I know that if I ever go back there, I won't be the same ever again.